You've probably heard the Easter story a million times, but have you heard the part that sounds like a zombie apocalypse? No, I'm not kidding. Right after Jesus dies on the cross, the Gospel of Matthew describes an earthquake, splitting rocks, and something truly wild, tombs breaking open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died being raised to life. It says they came out of their tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city, appearing to many people. So, what in the world is going on here? Did a bunch of zombies really just wander into Jerusalem? For centuries, this bizarre little passage has baffled readers, scholars, and believers. It's a mystery tucked right into the heart of the Christian story. Did this literally happen? Or is it something else entirely, a powerful symbol, a metaphor for something deeper? Today, we're diving deep into one of the strangest and most fascinating verses in the entire Bible. We'll explore the two main ways to understand this event, as a literal historical miracle and as a piece of profound symbolic art. Let's get into it. Let's start with the first possibility, that this event happened exactly as Matthew described it. This is the literal historical interpretation. For a long time, this was the standard way to read the text. You just take it at face value. The ground shook, the tombs opened, and people came back to life. From this perspective, it's not just a weird side story. It's a powerful demonstration of God's power at the very moment of the crucifixion. The theological meaning here is huge. First, it's seen as a tangible display of Christ's victory over death. His sacrifice was so cosmically powerful that its effects weren't just spiritual, they were physical. Death's grip was so thoroughly broken that it couldn't even hold on to these saints in their graves. In a way, these risen saints are like the first trophies of Christ's conquest over the ultimate enemy. Second, their resurrection is seen as a previewer down payment, the final, general resurrection that Christians believe will happen at the end of time. It takes this future hope and makes it a present reality for the people in Jerusalem. It's as if God was saying, see, the promise of eternal life isn't just a theory. It's already started. And who were these saints? Most likely, they were understood to be righteous Jews from the Old Testament era. Their resurrection, happening because of a Messiah they never knew in life, shows that salvation for everyone before and after the cross is secured through the singular work of Jesus. There's only one path to resurrection, and it goes straight through Calvary. Now, if we accept this as a literal event, a big question pops up. Were these people resuscitated, or were they resurrected? What's the difference? Think of Lazarus. Jesus called him from the tomb, and Lazarus came back to his old mortal life. He would eventually have to die again. That's resuscitation. Some believe that what happened here, these saints were brought back to life temporarily to act as witnesses, and then later returned to their graves. But many others argue they received new, glorified, immortal bodies, just like the one Jesus would have after his own resurrection. The Greek word Matthew uses for raised often points to a true, permanent resurrection. But this creates a little theological puzzle. The Apostle Paul calls Jesus the first fruits of the resurrection. If these saints were raised to glory before him, doesn't that challenge Jesus' status as the first? Well, supporters of this view point to Matthew's careful timing. He says the saints were raised at the moment of Christ's death, but they only came out of their tombs and appeared to people after Christ's own resurrection. This clever detail would preserve Jesus' place as the first to publicly emerge in a glorified state. If this is the case, it's generally assumed they didn't die again, but ascended into heaven, perhaps joining Jesus as his entourage. Of course, the elephant in the room for the literal interpretation is the silence. The complete, total, deafening silence from every other source. Think about it. Dead people walking through the streets of Jerusalem during Passover, one of the busiest times of the year. You'd think someone else would have mentioned it, right? Mark and Luke talk about the torn temple veil, but not this. The Apostle Paul, whose theology is built on resurrection, never uses this incredible event as evidence. Even non-biblical historians like Josephus and Tacitus, who made brief references to Jesus, say nothing about it. This silence is the single biggest challenge to the literal view. Defenders have a few responses. They argue that an absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Historical records from that time and place are incredibly scarce. They also suggest the event might have been more limited than we imagine. Matthew says many, not all, and maybe they only appeared privately to other believers as a sign of confirmation. But this whole debate points to a bigger issue. The demand for outside proof for a miracle sets a very high bar, one that's rarely met for any supernatural claim in ancient history. The core of the problem is a clash of worldviews, one that trusts the Gospels as reliable accounts of miracles, and another that requires a kind of proof that, for the supernatural, is almost impossible to find. So, what's the alternative? Let's explore the other major interpretation, the symbolic one. This is the view held by most modern biblical scholars. They argue that Matthew wasn't acting like a modern journalist, but as a theologian, he was using the rich symbolic language of his culture to explain the cosmic meaning of the crucifixion. This view neatly solves the problem of the historical silence. During this period in Jewish history, there was a popular style of writing called apocalyptic literature. These texts used a common set of symbols to describe God breaking into human history, earthquakes, the sun and moon going dark, and, you guessed it, the resurrection of the dead. Matthew uses this exact cluster of symbols at the cross. He is using the language of the end times to show that Jesus' death wasn't just a regular execution. It was a world-changing event that kicked off the final age of history. The earthquake, the split rocks, the risen saints, they aren't a checklist of physical events, but a powerful metaphor for the theological reality of what just happened. This symbolic reading gets even stronger when you see its connections to the Old Testament. The most powerful echo comes from Ezekiel 37, the famous vision of the Valley of Dry Bones. God promises the prophet Ezekiel that one day he will open the graves of his people and raise them to new life. It's like Matthew is staging a live-action fulfillment of this prophecy. What Ezekiel saw in a vision is now, in Matthew's telling, happening in reality because of the Messiah's death. It also brings to mind prophecies from Isaiah and Daniel about the dead rising from the dust of the earth. Matthew weaves these threads together to show that Jesus' death is the moment all these ancient promises start coming true. So, from this perspective, the reason no one else reports on the event is because there was no literal public event to report. The event exists inside Matthew's theologically rich story. It's a literary device, like special effects in a movie, designed to communicate a profound truth. But this doesn't mean Matthew was just making things up, or that it's just a symbol. For an ancient writer, the line between literal history and symbolic storytelling wasn't so rigid. He was writing what we might call theological history. The most important reality for him was the theological truth. Christ's death defeated the grave. The apocalyptic imagery was the best language he had to describe a historical event whose significance was so immense that normal prose just wouldn't do it justice. So, where does that leave us? We have two paths. One sees a literal historical miracle that powerfully demonstrates Christ's victory over death, but is challenged by a lack of corroboration. The other sees a masterful piece of theological symbolism that fits perfectly with Matthew's style and solves the problem of historical silence. It might be impossible to prove one view over the other. The passage remains a strange little text. But here's what's most important. Both interpretations point to the exact same world-shaking truth. Whether it happened literally or was described symbolically, Matthew's message is crystal clear. The death of Jesus was the turning point of all history. It was an event so powerful it shook the earth, tore the fabric of the old religious system, and broke open the gates of death itself. The modern idea of a zombie apocalypse is a story of horror. Matthew's account is the complete opposite. It's a story of ultimate hope. It's his dramatic, unforgettable declaration that the final enemy, death, has been conquered at the cross. The graves are open, pointing to a future day when all who believe will be raised to a new and everlasting life. The mystery of how Matthew told this truth may remain, but the truth itself is the unshakable foundation of his message. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. If you enjoyed this exploration, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content that goes beyond the surface of these ancient texts. See you next time.